Hey y'all, welcome back to Tessie Talks. If you don't already know, this is my final Tessie Talks. I mentioned it in the last one. I am ending the series at 10 Tessie Talks. I think 10 is a nice round even number, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. But I've really enjoyed making these videos, sitting in this car just talking about random stuff, and this won't be the last time you see me in this car probably, but the topic probably won't be so centered around big law. I felt like most of my videos in this series and Tessie Talks were about big law or some kind of topic related to leaving big law and things like that, and this video was about that. And so now that chapter of my life is pretty much done. I feel like it makes sense to end this series too. I am no longer associated with big law. I don't work in big law. I've moved past that. It's time to, let the content move past that too, at least on my end. Today's video is a good one to me. It's something that y'all have asked me a couple times, but before we get into it, I just want to start how I used to start these. I want to end this series the right way and talk about what I'm reading right now. And so I have been reading this book for a while. There Was a Country. Someone recommended it a few videos ago, a few Tessie Talks ago. I mentioned that I'm trying to read more about the Nigerian Civil War and I needed recommendations for good books, and someone recommended this. I'm sorry, I don't have my YouTube app in front of me, so I can't look at the name of the person who recommended it, but really appreciate it. It's been really good. It's the same author as Things Fall Apart, which is one of my favorite books ever. Almost done with, well, kinda, I'm like 60% done, almost done with it. And it's been nice to put historical and political perspective on my parents' childhood, because they lived through the war and they talk about it all the time. That is that. So let's get into the video. Everyone's favorite topic: money, pay, all that type of stuff. Someone asked in Tessie Talks number 9, they asked if I could talk about, I can't remember the exact phrasing of the question, but something related to post big law pay or something like that. It was something about pay and something about after big law. I remember that for sure. I just thought it's time to address this because people, okay. I remember when I posted that I was going in-house and people either responded on Instagram or responded in the comments, I can't remember which one, saying, oh, how are you going to adjust to the decrease in pay, or are you worried about the pay and things like that. And I remember just sitting there reading it and thinking, when did I tell y'all I took a pay cut? Why are y'all assuming I took a pay cut because I said I went in-house? Like, that is not a safe assumption. But I had the same assumption before I entered the legal industry. Coming out of law school, I thought the same thing. I thought if you go in-house from big law, of course, initially you take a pay cut, maybe eventually you get promoted and things like that. But initially, definitely you have to take a pay cut. I had the same assumption. Wasn't until I entered the industry, built connections with people who are transparent and like sharing their journey, sharing their pay. And just from hearing through the streets, through the grapevine, whatever you want to call it, and realizing like, oh, that's actually not a safe assumption. And a lot of people that I know who have transitioned from big law to in-house do not take pay cuts, have not taken a pay cut. And so just to add more context, the last firm I worked at, which was a firm here in DC, I built a few pretty strong relationships, and I've caught up with, I would say, like 4 people that I used to work with within the last 2 months. And I can tell y'all that none of them took pay cuts. None of them work in big law anymore. And none of them took a pay cut. They're all Black attorneys as well. So I'm gonna just add that on top of that. So y'all, it's not necessarily a thing. It's not automatic that you leave big law, you go in-house. Did they all go in-house? Yeah, they all went in-house, and you take a pay cut. I'm gonna talk about some of the factors I think that affects whether people take pay cuts or not, leaving out of big law, and just where that narrative even comes from. So if you're new here, I worked as a big law associate for 3.5 years. Big law just means that it's a law firm with prestige. These are the most profitable firms. They give high partner payouts, and most notably, or what they're known for, most infamously, whatever you want to call it, these firms are known for paying law school graduates straight out of law school with really high salaries, especially for what you might expect for someone who doesn't have any practical experience yet, have the need for a lot of associates straight out of law school. And so they pay these high salaries, and there's this narrative that comes with that if you want to make a lot as an attorney, you need to be in big law. Like, that's kind of sometimes the narrative that comes out of law school, that came out of my law school experience. I went to Columbia in New York. So that is just all context. And then working in-house just means that instead of working at a firm where the firm is your workplace, that is a very different work environment than in-house. Now those companies that were once your client, now that is now your employer. So instead of having a startup as a client, you might work for the startup. You are getting a check from the startup, from the CEO. The startup is signing your checks, And now that's your one client, at least from 9 to 5, if you don't have any freelance work on the side. I've noticed that there are factors that affect whether or not people take pay cuts. If you're leaving Big Law and if you want to stay in the legal industry, I don't know anyone that's necessarily done that in their first or second year, so I can't comment on that. But I do kind of assume that by your third or fourth, fifth year and beyond, it might be a little bit easier because you can point to more experience. The story goes that a lot of times in-house, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to train people straight out of law school. So they do expect you to be able to do more things. Whereas when you go into a law firm, for the most part, they don't expect you to know how to do anything. That's a very different dynamic, it's a different environment. So I do think when you leave matters. So that's just one, the first factor I would say. The second factor, which I've already touched on, is whether you're leaving law or not leaving law. Of course, if you're leaving law, the world becomes your oyster, and maybe you have the next great idea and you do a startup and you make great money from that. Maybe you go into one of the other established fields that are known to be high paying, like I've already mentioned, consulting, or something commissions based. You're a people person, you leave and you go to commissions based recruiting or that kind of industry. And so leaving law, of course, affects whether or not you're going to maintain your salary after you leave Big Law, if you're in Big Law, or just worried, or you're just curious about how finances work after Big Law. Another thing, the kind of company. So I think your priorities, how do I phrase this? Priorities post Big Law would be my third factor. And what I mean by that is the kind of company that you go to matters. Let's say your practice was capital markets and Big Law. That means you worked on bonds and stocks and those kind of transactions and documentation. And a lot of times with that kind of work, your client will be a really big bank or something like that. And so if you leave Big Law and you go to that bank, that same bank that was paying the firm the really high rates, you can assume this bank has a lot of money. They might have the money to pay their in-house counsel really high salaries. Same with a fund, same with the big tech companies. All these places or all these kind of environments that have plenty of money and that have the budget to pay their lawyers really high amounts. And so the kind of places you're going, I think, does matter. That's very different than going to a government position where the government, it is safe to assume, I would say, if someone leaves Big Law and goes into the government, that they took a pay cut. Or if you're going into a really small startup with just 3 people that just started getting off the ground and that they're still just operating off of one computer. So I think the environment, the kind of company, same thing with if you want to leave Big Law but you still want to be in a law firm, which was kind of ties into like my fourth one, the kind of firm you choose to go to, because there are boutique firms that actually pay above market. So if you don't know, in Big Law, everyone makes the same amount across industry. If I meet someone and they say a certain firm, they say they work at Skadden, they say they work at White & Case, I'm just kind of like thinking of firms off the top of my head, and I was working at a firm, then I know we make the same amount because the market sets the associate salaries. They're public. You can Google them and find out what they are. The bonuses for the most part are all the same. And so the market sets so much with Big Law. And then sometimes you have these boutique firms that will pay market or pay above market or give above market bonuses because they're so specialized and they've cornered a piece of like the legal industry market. And so sometimes if you want to leave, you just don't like Big Law, or maybe you just don't like working with so many people and you want a more intimate environment and you go to a boutique firm. I can't say you're going to be working less, but maybe that's an environment that's, more conducive to your working style. People might think because Samantha and I have showed our lives, on this platform, and we've shown Big Law that that's what all law firms are like, but that is just one slice of the law firm market. There are so many different kind of firms. There are mid-sized firms, there are boutique firms, there are small firms, there are sole proprietors. There's someone I know who worked with, I think at her firm that she worked at, there was just her and one other lawyer, and it was a pretty good firm, and she made good money doing that. I think she was doing immigration law. The last thing I wanted to talk about on here was just, my personal priorities when I was leaving Big Law. And so I worked in Big Law for 3.5 years. And when I was leaving, my priority was not to stay in Big Law. I wanted to leave Big Law. I knew that for sure. Right below that, I also really, really wanted to get into the entertainment legal industry. I wanted to work with creatives. Hey y'all, so the lighting isn't great. I'm so sorry about that, but I really want to finish this video. My camera died and so had to, go charge it and everything. But I believe what I was saying was that I left Big Law and my priority was not to maintain my pay. My priority was to get my foot in the door in entertainment. And I, not to sound any kind of way, but I can confidently say that I took a pay cut going to my in-house job by choice. I went to a media and entertainment company that's also a nonprofit. And so, their budget is limited and I understood that going in, and it was really about the experience. Like, I have my goals very clear. I know what my goals are, and I know why I was going into that job. But it's not because I went in-house. I know a recruiter that I went to school with, and he was sending me jobs where my pay would have been maybe slightly less or the same if I would have took him up on those opportunities. That is not even to account for what I would have found if I would have looked by myself. Definitely had the experience, and I had been in big law long enough to where I don't think I would have had to take a pay cut. I know I wouldn't have had to take a pay cut. Actually, there are plenty of jobs out there, like with my skill set, where I would have been fine. But I wanted to pivot. I've been wanting to do entertainment work for a long time and wanting to work with creatives and be in that industry. And so that was a priority. I've also had a couple people tell me, oh, well, you went into entertainment. It doesn't sound like it makes as much money as venture capital or the things you were doing. So of course you took a pay cut. Not sure where that assumption came from, but I'll just go ahead and debunk that now too, in case other people think that as well. There are big law practices, full-blown practices that focus on entertainment. There are boutique law firms that focus on that, mid-sized law firms. There are huge entertainment companies that we all know about that have really big budgets. And so it's not because I went into entertainment. It's not because I went in-house. It's really just my position. Like, I am someone who did not take a single entertainment-related law class. Didn't take trademark, didn't take IP, didn't take copyright, didn't take NIL, didn't do an internship, anything in this area. Have never worked in this area. And so it was hard to like kind of hustle my way into it. I mean, I guess networking is the right word, but to really, really put my best foot forward, going to lots of events and reaching out to people, and to get this job was really a blessing. Like, I will say that it was really a blessing. I was really grateful for it. And so taking a pay cut was fine with me because, and I have so much more to say about that too, because, and I'm also not one track minded about money. I think y'all have that perception of me by now from the way I speak, but the way I make money from being a lawyer is just the way I make money from being a lawyer. There are so many other things that I'm interested in. There's so many other things I want to explore and what I want to get into. And so for one piece of my pie, the income went down, but that doesn't mean that that's gonna be like that forever. It won't be like that forever. I know that. I've always seen it once I took this job as a temporary pay cut, and I'm still, saying that. So I took a temporary one. I'm not hungry by any means. I'm still fine. And so it's not like, I had to, do anything drastic because of like the pay cut or anything like that. But I did take one. I wanted to give all that context because I didn't tell you all that. This is my first time saying like I went to a nonprofit. It's my first time saying like all these things. And so when people were just like commenting like, oh, how was the pay cut? I was just like, y'all, that doesn't mean I took a pay cut. And so hopefully y'all understand that now. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. I hope y'all know by now that y'all can always let us know if you have any recommendations, what you want to hear in the next video. Won't be a Tessie Talks, but doesn't mean I can't answer any questions. I have a couple vlogs that I'm excited to shoot that I hope you all enjoy. And so good things coming, good things coming on this channel. But just wanted to wrap that up. I think pay is a good topic to wrap up this little Tessie Talk series on, to wrap up, talking about big law and all of that. That is that from me. I will see y'all next time. Bye.